Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host, Paula Taylor, and this is episode 186. This is one of the very rare times that I am going to tell you, if you've not listened to episode 184, What's the Deal with Karmic Clearing, I actually suggest that you go back and listen to that episode before you listen to this one, because I'm going to reference a story I told in that episode quite a bit as an example in this episode. And I'm not going to go back through and tell that whole story this time. So what we're going to talk about today is a topic I've been sort of hinting at or saying is coming. What's the deal with trickster energy? We're going to talk about trickster energy today. And this might end up being more than one episode. We'll see. I have a lot to say about this. And I was thinking about this before I came on and trying to figure out like how I wanted to organize this. And there's so many tangents and different ways I can go with this. I decided to just sort of get into it and start channeling and just see what comes through. And if you end up having questions, leave some questions. We can always do another episode about this. There's actually an option on Spotify now, I believe, to leave comments. So if you have questions, you can put those in the comments there. And this may be something that we talk about again in the future. I'm going to tell you that this is a topic that I had never really heard about until I started dealing directly with this energy and recognizing it and becoming aware of it. It started actually last year, and I'm going to give you some examples of what I'm talking about. But actually, before I do that, I want to talk about what I mean by this. What is this energy? What are we talking about? What is trickster energy? And the first thing I'm going to say is a lot of times I've been an energy worker for over 20 years. I've seen a lot of different types of energy. And on a quantum level, everything is unconditional love, right? But in this physical duality of the 3D, there are a lot of different types of energy. If you can think about it this way, this just came in. This is actually a great understanding of this. If you remember learning about light and color, white contains all colors. And in order to kind of split out the colors, you use a prism, right? You use something that sort of splits out the light. And then from white light comes all these different colors. That is kind of how energy works. So we have all of this unconditional love energy. You can think of that as the white light. And in the 3D or in the 12D, I don't know what the D is for this, at the source, at the oneness, at the unconditional love of all things, this is unconditional love. And as it passes through this prism of density and separates out from that source, as source begins to experience itself as not source in order to understand what it is, it's like the prism splitting those lights out. And so we have all these different colors. We have all these different types of energies in this physical plane, especially here on Earth, one of the denser places. There are denser places than this, but this is one of the denser places energetically. So there are energies that I would call opportunistic energies. What I mean by that is that they will take advantage of a situation to come in. So there absolutely are people who are dedicated to trickster energy, who have like built their whole foundation around this energy and use it knowingly, consciously, sometimes intentionally, but not consciously. It's their entire like ego self is built around this. But I think more often than not, this is an opportunistic energy. This is an energy that comes in what we might call a moment of weakness, when we are not filling out our energy fully with our own beautiful source energy. There are gaps in our energy field, and other energies come into those gaps. And that's a normal part of being human. And not all of those energies are looking for our highest good, or even their own, interestingly. This is one that's kind of in that category. So we're talking about an energy that will sort of come in when you are opening yourself up, knowingly or unknowingly. And especially when you're looking outside yourself for validation, I think is when this energy comes in. So this energy was introduced to me. Somebody called it trickster energy. And I had a vague understanding of what that meant. There's a lot of indigenous cultures that kind of embrace this energy as sort of, you can think of it's a little bit like the Fool in the tarot, but not exactly. in Native American culture, you can look up and read about Coyote. So Coyote is this kind of trickster character who goes around basically messing with people. And sometimes it's actually for the good, and sometimes it's not so much. The intention there is just to mess with people. There is no like wider intention. There is no grander intention. It's just to like mess with people. And I don't consider that to be for the highest good. We'll get more into that. We're going to talk more about that. When I first kind of started recognizing where I was seeing this energy coming up in my current life and past lives, in this big karmic clearing that I'm going to talk a little more about, I didn't really understand what it meant. And it took me a while. I've been like trying to wrap my mind around this energy for a while. And part of it is because I am sort of naive, and I have a tendency to just assume that other people have the highest good in mind, because I do. And that doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean that I don't hurt people. Like, we are human, we are perfectly imperfect, right? But I always try to have the intention for not only my own highest good, but other people's highest good. And so I tend to sometimes not recognize or understand sometimes energies that don't have that intention. So it's taken me a while to like wrap my brain around this. And I'm going to explain it in a way that makes more sense in my mind, and hopefully kind of modernizes this idea. You can go and you can look up the Trickster. You can read about that. You can read about Coyote. Interestingly, in like indigenous cultures, or in some other cultures, like in Bali, they embrace these like darker sort of energies. It's all part of the duality, right? It's all part of like embracing all of ourselves. And they have all of these like temples around to all the different gods, like the quote unquote good or light gods, and the dark or shadow gods, or bad, whatever word you want to use for that. And you can feel it in the energy there. I will say the energy to me felt very volatile and not completely safe. And that I have a little bit of a story that is tangentially related to that. In indigenous cultures, like I said, they sort of embrace this idea of this trickster energy. In something like Christianity, which a lot of us are maybe more familiar with at this point, this would be what is like temptation energy, or this idea of being tempted or being led into sin. Like when I read about the trickster, one of the articles I read was like, the most famous trickster is the devil. And I was like, oh, well, wow, that got dark quickly. So I'm going to explain this in a way that I've come to understand it, that makes a little bit more sense to my brain, and I feel like modernizes this idea a little bit. I'm going to give a couple examples of what I'm talking about from my own life. And then we're going to talk briefly about like, how do we move out of this energy, and how do we keep this energy out of our system? How do we protect ourselves from this energy, for lack of a better term? So there's two ways that I think about this energy now that really serves me. And the most straightforward one is the Wizard of Oz. I use a lot of Wizard of Oz references. It's a very spiritual, there's a lot of depth there spiritually. So if you think about the Wizard of Oz, when they get to the Emerald, they're trying to get to the Emerald City, right? They want to meet the wizard. The wizard's going to grant Dorothy's wish to go home, and Scarecrow wants a brain, and the Tin Man wants a heart, and the Cowardly Lion wants courage. They're all lacking something, right? They're all looking for something outside of themselves. And they get there, and there's this huge, scary projection. I am the great and powerful Oz. And it's very intentionally scary, and they're all very frightened of this thing that they're looking at, that has the power to perhaps grant them their wish that they're looking for outside of themselves. And then Toto, I don't think this is a coincidence either, because animals see through energy a lot better than we do. Toto walks over to this little curtain and pulls it back. And there's a man behind the curtain, and he's like manipulating this big projection that they're seeing. And they all start noticing this man and realizing that this energy is really just a man messing with them, trying to project something. And he starts saying things like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That is such a good representation of trickster energy. The other way I like to think about this, that's a little bit of an expansion on this, is I think of it as con man energy. So con men trick you into giving them something, and they exploit your weakness in order to gain something from you. So if you're a lonely widow and this is a handsome man, he's going to come in, he's going to seduce you, he's going to get you to trust him, and then he's going to steal your money, let's say. And it's very interesting when I was like grappling with this and seeing all this energy coming up in my life and like just getting kind of really freaked out and sort of scared of it and not understanding it and trying to figure it out. My husband and I were watching this show called White Collar. That's an old show that's now on Netflix. And it's about this con man who ends up working with the FBI in order to work through his sentence so that he doesn't have to stay in prison. And he has another friend who's a con man. And they were sitting having a conversation in an episode we were watching when I was really like grappling with this. And the one says to the other one, the biggest lie that a con man tells is to himself. And all of a sudden, a bunch of stuff clicked into place. And I was like, oh, this is this energy of exploiting other people's weaknesses in order to protect your own, in order to hide your own. So if you think about the Wizard of Oz reference, this is a man who's trapped in Oz. He was just a performing kind of a con man, a performing like carnival man, like that went, they used to call him a flim flam man. You know, they went from town to town selling snake oil and potions and stuff. So he gets stranded here and ends up sort of projecting this image of being this great and powerful wizard, knowing deep down that he's just a man and that he can't really grant these wishes. The biggest lie a con man tells is to himself. This is important to remember with this energy, because the biggest trick a trickster plays is on themselves. This energy is all about projecting a false narrative or a false front in order to exploit someone else. And that may be celebrated in some cultures, and it may be demonized literally in Christianity. And I was thinking about this right before I came on, like, how do I talk about this in terms of this 3D, 5D shift? Because I keep saying the 5D is all inclusive and we want all vibrations, but there is a but there, or an and. We want our vibrations to be clear, expanded, and harmonious. And trickster energy is not clear. It is a muddy energy. It is intentionally trying to confuse you or trick you in order to get what it wants out of you. And from that absolutely comes contraction. It is not an expanded energy. And so when I first started having awareness of this, my seraphim guides literally came in and gave an ultimatum and said, this energy is not coherent with angelic energy. There will be no harmony in your field as you reclaim this source energy, which is what angelic energy is, as long as you are entertaining this trickster energy. They cannot coexist fully. And so, as we move into the 5D, we are letting go of the frequencies that no longer serve us. The shadows are coming up so that we can see them and let them go. This is one of the shadow energies that we are meant to be moving out of, moving away from. And this is a global humanitarian invitation. This is not a political show, but this is such a good example that I cannot not say this as the perfect example of this right now. The United States has a literal trickster in the White House. Donald Trump is a trickster. He is a con man. He is someone who tells people what they want to hear. He exploits their weakness. People are uncomfortable. A good example of this is a financial thing. So before the election, people were very concerned that things were expensive. So he went around telling them, I'm going to make egg prices lower. Eggs are too expensive. This is all Biden's fault. I'm going to make these eggs less expensive. He's telling people what they want to hear. People don't want to be struggling. They don't want to be worried about feeding their families. And as soon as he got into office, he made the prices go higher. This is a perfect example of how a con man or a trickster works. They tell you what you need to hear. They exploit your weakness, and then they turn around and screw you over, essentially. And the interesting thing about this is that this energy is so pervasive and so powerful that people do not see it. And I'm going to give you some examples from my own life to kind of make this a little more concrete. There are so many people that still support this person who is knowingly, intentionally, consciously hurting them, and they cannot see it. They are so invested in the lie, in the con, in the facade. They are so engrossed with the big wizard, the powerful, great and powerful Oz on the projection screen, that they're not looking at the little man behind the screen pulling the levers, who does not have their highest good in mind. So let me give you a couple of examples of this from my own life. I have goosebumps while I'm talking, which is always an interesting confirmation sign for my guides that I'm on the right track. I'm going to talk about a couple of situations in my life where this has shown up in order to just help you understand, first of all, what this looks like how does this show up? And also, how do we move out of this? And what's the harm? What's the harm of letting the trickster stay in your field? What's the harm of letting this shadow kind of coexist? Because a lot of the times I'm saying, oh, we have to embrace all of ourselves, but this is not your source energy. This is an other energy. And as long as we're in the physical, we're going to have energies that are not of source. This is an energy that is very much not of source, to the point that my guides say it is incoherent. It will never harmonize with source energy. It must be released in the physical in order for us to regain and re-expand more into oneness or unconditional love or source energy. So the first really good example of this, I talked about a while ago. I've brought it up a few times, and the episode, I think, where I talked about it a lot was what's the deal with ancestral healing? And this came up a lot when I was in Bali, which is interesting because I think something about the energy there was really sort of reflecting this energy. And it took me a while to figure this out, and I talked about that. So a while ago, I was working with my dad and kind of trying to heal some ancestral energy from his maternal side of the family. And this ancestor came forward that was from this Polish lineage and kind of showed me that they had been essentially witches. That's not probably, or psychics, or that is the right word, I guess. That's not what they showed me at first. But they showed me that they worked with herbs, they worked with earth energy, they read people's fortunes, they helped people. And this person presented themselves to me as very much wanting the highest good for those they worked with, for me, for themselves. And yet, when I saw this person in my mind through this visioning process, my guides showed me the little old lady from Snow White who shows up with the poisoned apple. This is the perfect example of trickster energy. So in the story and in my own life, this little old lady shows up very gentle, offering a gift. In my case, she was offering me this connection to my ancestral energy, to my ancestral land in Poland. And it appears that this person is here to help you, that this energy is here to help you. Just like in Snow White, this is a little old lady offering her an apple. And then when she bites into the apple is poisoned. When I accepted that energy into my field, over my dad's objections, to the point that he left my field, if you recall, he was trying to warn me, this is how insidious this energy is. This is how tricky this energy is. I trust my dad. I have done so much work with him. He is one of my guides now in the spiritual. And yet when he told me not to accept this energy, not to allow this energy into the field, I thought he was just operating out of his own fear of the unknown, his own fear of all the things that he probably would not have been open to when he was alive. Things like being psychic or being witchy or, working with energy, and all of that stuff is not something that he was comfortable with in life. So when he said, no, don't let this in your field, I thought that this was part of the ancestral healing. And I thought that I was making a decision that was the best for all of us in our best and highest interest. My guides tried to warn me. My dad literally warned me, and I still let the energy in. That is how this energy works. It is very good at convincing you that it is here to help you. And a lot of times we let it in without knowing. This is an example of I I did not know this was trickster energy when I let it in, or I would not have let it in. But I also didn't understand just how harmful and insidious this energy would be until months and months and months and months and months and months, maybe half a year or more later, when I was in a session. I'm going to bring up sessions a couple times. This is why it's so important to have someone else to hold space for you, because we all have blind spots about ourselves. And when I was in a session with my friend who's also an energy worker, and she said, this energy is not serving you, you need to look at it. I initially dismissed her as well until I really did look at it. And then all of a sudden it was like it flooded in all this darkness and this nastiness. And this was very, very clearly not for my highest good or the highest good of all. And it took me a while to get it out of my system. I had to be pretty strong and a little bit abrupt. I'm not sure the word. I had to banish this energy. I used the word banish. I had to strongly disinvite that energy from my system to get it out. So the other example links back to this karmic clearing. And that's why I wanted to kind of tell that whole story first, so I didn't have to go back into it. Just very briefly, I have had a connection with this first human life version of myself for a while, who was a medicine woman priestess in Peru, like thousands of years ago, a couple thousand years ago, I think, and maybe longer. And I told this story of how she had an affair with the chief's son, ended up getting pregnant, and then they took her son away. If you want to hear the whole version of that, go back to 184 and listen to that one. What's the deal with karmic clearing? And I talked about in this episode that there was another aspect to this, and it was just too much to get into all at once, because that was a long enough story on its own. That's why I split it into 2 episodes. So the rest of that story is that there was trickster energy involved in this woman getting seduced and ending up having a child. And I had to wait until I had worked through a lot of this. I have so much compassion for this version of myself. And just briefly, I've been thinking a lot about past and parallel lives and future lives and non-human origins, and like, how does all of this fit in? And the way I see it is sort of like this idea of a big light with a bunch of pendants hanging off of it. So the big light is your soul. And then these smaller pendant lights are all the different journeys that your soul is going on, different differentiations. So this woman is a completely different differentiation for me. We are not the same person in any way, shape, or form. And we are connected to the same soul. We are serving the same higher self. And so we are connected in that way. And I have so much compassion for her. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about kind of some of the things that have come through that explain, first of all, just how easy it is to get duped by this energy and just how pervasive this energy can be. So this woman came into a physical body, into a human body, with full knowledge of her quantum origin. She knew she was Seraphim, and she was sent here essentially to observe. What came through in the session I was having that I loved, because I'm kind of a Star Trek nerd, was this idea of the Star Trek Prime Directive, which is to observe and not to interfere. So she was here mainly to observe humanity, just to kind of see what it was like to be human and to sort of stay detached. That was her assignment. That was her mission. And I think very quickly, I know that the Seraphim don't understand what it is to be human, because I now have been human many, many, many times. And my understanding is that I'm the only Seraphim who's left the realm and done this. This is just how they've explained it to me, or it's not exactly explaining, but telepathed it to me. So we didn't understand as Seraphim, when we sent someone into a human body, just what it meant to be human. So very quickly, this girl, as she was growing up, wanted to help these people. She developed a lot of love, as you would as a human, for her fellow tribes people. And as you know, being human love is not the same as divine love. Human love can be possessive, it can be messy, it can be confusing, And I think very quickly she became confused and sort of forgot her mission and wanted to help these people, had a very beautiful, intention for the highest good. That's how she ended up as a medicine woman, because she had these these frequencies. She was a singer. She sang to heal. And that I very much relate to. And when I first started channeling and vocal toning, she was very helpful in that process. So here is where it can get really messy and muddy and confusing, because generally we are not all one thing. This was a very good person with very good intentions who was also very lonely. That's the part that I understand now. And I relate to that to a certain extent. Being neurodivergent, being kind of a weird spiritual person, being precocious from an early age, like being interested in adult things and not really relating to other kids. I grew up feeling like an outsider, and I cannot imagine how multiplied that was for this woman who was basically told, go down and observe, but don't interact, minimally interact. So I think she was very lonely. I think she really loved the other people in her tribe. And I think she developed a crush on the chief's son. And as we do, who hasn't had a crush? And who hasn't had a crush on kind of the bad boy, right? Like that's a trope for a reason. So I think she had a crush on this boy from afar, because they were really like teenagers, like, young adults, teenagers. And in the meantime, the chief was essentially betrothed. I'm sure that's not the word they use, but he was promised to someone else. He was promised to another chief's daughter from another tribe. It was a political union. If you think about in terms of royalty, it's like, the one king sending his daughter to another king to marry the son to like unite their kingdoms. It's that kind of a thing. And so he was unhappy because he didn't want to be stuck with this person that he didn't know. He felt very controlled, didn't have a lot of control over his own life and what he wanted to do. And both of them were perfectly open for that trickster energy to come in, because it finds the weaknesses, right? It finds your wants, your needs, and it exploits them. And so they developed this bond that was forbidden, and that made it more juicy, right? I mean, that's, especially as a young person, that's one of those things, you're kind of hooked on hormones and adrenaline. And the trickster energy was very much involved in their union. And it's interesting, when I was in this session and all this information was coming up, I was feeling very blocked. And luckily, this person that I see, my guides will communicate with her, which always makes me laugh, because she's like, how do you make sense of all this noise? And at one point she was like, there's something else going on here. And I had nothing. So I was just like, you need to tell her, because I'm not getting anything. And she said, I see this thing like peeking out from behind the man, and it's not a person. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And as soon as we sort of felt into it, like together, it was like, this is that same trickster energy, because this is something that's been a theme for me over the last probably 2 years now that keeps coming up. And as soon as I recognized that, I realized that this trickster energy has been a thread through all of the human lives, sort of in linear time since then. Because this woman, when they took her son, this young girl, was understandably distraught. She made a mistake. She broke some rules. Teenagers do that all the time. And the punishment, the consequences of that were that they took her son away. They raised him to be about 6 or so, and then they sacrificed him. And I have looked this up. This is a real practice that happened. I always trust the information that comes in, but it's interesting to get a confirmation from kind of a historical source. This was a practice in this area of Peru at this time. And she's been coming back every life since, trying to control, using this trickster energy, which is like a puppeteer. Think about, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It's like a puppeteer. She's been using this puppeteer energy to control all of these other versions of my poor soul, trying to get them to have children so that she could like live out this life that she never got to really finish in her mind that went so wrong for her. And it wasn't until I understood this and realized this that I was able to put a stop to it and disinvite her and that energy from my field. And I have a lot of compassion for her because I know she wasn't a bad person. That's the insidiousness and the pervasiveness. This went on for like thousands of years until I was like, nope, I'm going to see this and I'm going to let this go. And again, I could not do it on my own. I needed help. This is why we need each other. There's an episode called This Is Why We Need Each Other. This is why we need each other. I needed someone else to hold the space and help me see this because it was such a deeply implanted program in my probably physical DNA at this point. I spent 8 years, math is not my strong suit, trying to have a child. I did numerous infertility treatments. I had 12 miscarriages. I do not think that as a seraphim, I am supposed to have children. And when I look at all these other lives, when I did have children, it always went wrong. They got sick and died. They were born. I have one memory of a life where she was born probably with Down syndrome, but at the time, like they just killed them and I wouldn't let them kill her, but I also wasn't very good to her. And she probably didn't have a very good life. Like I was not meant to have children. Initially, I was meant to just come here and observe. And every time in between, when I go back to the seraphim realm, they say, you don't have to go back. You don't have to carry this karma. Even there, I think this trickster energy has been pulling me back in over and over again, repeating this cycle of trying to have children with the same partner for a lot of my lifetime. That's a whole nother story we're not going to get into. This energy is tricky. That's why it's called trickster. It's insidious. It is sneaky and it is pervasive. And I have now encountered multiple people, including this version of myself, who knowingly worked with this energy. At a certain point, she was aware of this energy and she was allowing it to use these other versions of my soul to try to get what she wanted. And here's the thing about the trickster. You will never get what you want from the trickster energy because what you want already exists within you. Energetically, spiritually, in the 3D, it can very much look like it doesn't. I think the loneliness of this woman finding this, who she thought was going to be her partner, who was really just a fling, essentially, and in his own trickstery energy, I think having a son she thought was going to make her feel whole and less lonely and like something actually belonged to her. And I get it. And it never works because we have to find it within ourselves. So the last part of this is like, how do we work with this energy? How do we get this energy out of us? How do we like avoid it coming in? And this is this is part of these huge shifts I've been having. For a while, I was thinking I have to protect myself from this energy because it was showing up everywhere. It was showing up everywhere so that I could see it, so that I could release it. And at a certain point, I have these archangel sigils, and my guides were actually telling me to get them tattooed on my wrists. And as I've come through this shift, that directive, demand, strong suggestion has gone. It may come back because when we are fully in our power, when we are fully occupying our space, when we are opening our channel to true source, divine, unconditional love, ki, chi, prana, whatever word you want to use for it, energy, we are fully protected. This energy is looking to exploit your doubts. It's looking to exploit the areas where you're holding on to scarcity and lack and feeling unworthy. And I set my intention, if you recall, at the beginning of this year to release shame, lack, and feeling unworthy. Shame's a good one because shame hides in the corners. That's a great energy to exploit because if you won't look at your own shadowy corners, lots of things can sneak in there and hide. And I'm not saying this to scare you because ultimately it is all source energy. And as we set our intention to expand into a clearer, more expanded and more harmonious way of being, being more in conditional love, being more in that 5D energy, there are some denser energies that cannot go with us into that space. And we are seeing this again reflected societally. All of these dark shadows coming to the surface. One of these opportunistic shadowy energies is this trickster energy. And in some ways, it's one of the scarier energies because it is trickstery, because it is not straightforward. I have seen this in my life in a lot of places now where I never would have seen it. It was like I got a special pair of glasses and like, show me the trickster. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's there. Oh, it's there. Oh, it's there. Like somebody pulled the curtain back and all of a sudden I could see the little man behind the curtain, the little puppeteer kind of controlling all these situations or some relationships, things like that. And it was it was part of my big tower collapsing moment to take a strong stance against this energy and tell it had to leave. And it took time and it took repeated intention. And I was very scared as this was happening. It felt very scary to me. It felt like I didn't have control of my own energy. There's this like dirty feeling. There's a violation feeling of knowing that like there's this other energy that's been like, I sat down and I was like, did I ever even want to have a child? That is like a hugely frightening thought. And I've been working with this inner child version of myself. She's about 4 and she is like sassy and strong and doesn't take stuff from nobody. And she's like, no, I never wanted to have a kid. I wanted to go on Star Search and I wanted to be a singer. And I don't know what happened because you're me. So trying to realize, like, there was a point at which I was like, oh my God, did I waste like 40 something years of my life or 30? I mean, I was still trying to have I started in about 2012, 11. And then my last fertility treatment was like 2018, 2019. So this was a long period of time where pretty much my whole life and all of my energy was focused on trying to have a baby. And yes, absolutely, there's like ego aspects of this version of myself for sure that wanted that. And it's a very programmed societal response. You get older, you have children, the cycle goes on. But when I check in with that, like pure, for lack of like clearer, that's a good clearer version of myself, this little young version of myself before a lot of the programming set in and a lot of the, doubts and all of that set in. She's got her arms crossed and she's like, I didn't want a baby. I didn't want that responsibility. I wanted to be a star. And like, there's problematic aspects in that. There's an ego piece of that. It's one of the reasons we've been having a hard time integrating because she keeps coming in and going like, you're so soft. You're so, like, she doesn't like this ease thing because that I was always very driven from a very young age. And she's starting to wrap her mind around this idea of like, sharing your voice doesn't have to be about performing. That was a program that she had already received by age 4. If you want to share your voice, if you want to sing, you have to be a performer. Your goal is to be a famous performer. That's not where I'm headed. Like, I am here for the sound healing and the channeling and all of this stuff. So we're trying to reintegrate. And part of this process has been me having to let go of that trickster energy, having to recognize it, having to release it, having to strongly banish it from my field, having to have some difficult conversations around it, and now starting to recognize when I see it approaching me, when I see it in other people, and having to just continually reset this intention. This energy is not welcome in my field. I am always setting the intention for the highest and most benevolent good. But the trickiness of this is that a lot of this is ancestral and it's linked to other lives. And so when you came in to this life with this energy already in your field, when you set that intention for the highest and most benevolent good, it doesn't necessarily get rid of these old things. We have to still clear them. Once you recognize it and you set the intention to clear it, then your intention holds. And I will specifically state that if I feel like this energy is coming forward now, I will say, if there is any trickster energy involved in this, I want no part of it. because it will present itself in a way that seems like it's for your benefit, and it will stroke your ego in a way that seems like it's going to be expansive for you. And when you put your trickstery glasses on, when you put your like see through the con man glasses on, you go, ooh, no thank you. But it's a process. And just briefly, and this may go into another episode later, the way to really make yourself unattractive to the trickster is to be completely whole within yourself. And right now, what I'm doing, what I've been working on, and I'm sure this will come into a show or more than one, is this idea of this integration of the divine masculine, the divine feminine, the divine dark, and the divine light, that yin, Akash space, and that yang kind of angelic seraphim source space. Just because something's dark doesn't mean that it's bad. It's the murkiness, it's the muddiness. So as we begin to fully occupy our bodies, because somatically these old things are in our bodies somewhere. I've had belly issues my whole life. And as I'm releasing this energy, I can feel things in there shifting. Somatically, it's got to be released. It's got to be noticed. It's got to be released. It can't just be done in the mental. It can't just be done in the quantum field, because we are multifaceted beings. It's got to be done on all levels of our being, including the physical. So as we embody physically and release what's no longer serving our highest and most benevolent good, and we begin to expand out and we begin to fill those little cracks, those little holes of the I'm not enough, or I'm too much, or I never have enough, I'll never be successful, I'll never, what, all of those things. I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not good enough, all of the not enough, too muchness that's been programmed into us that comes from previous lives. This strong desire to have a child was not even mine, was not this differentiation personality self. It was not even mine. There was a piece of it that was mine, but like 90% of it came from this original past life that I've karmically cleared. And so you can see the depth and the complexity of this. The ancestral energy that wanted to come in from my dad's side, that's not my energy. And that's one of the things I talked about, and I'm going to just repeat briefly in that karmic clearing episode. We are at a point in history when we are being asked to move forward as ourselves. I am a unique differentiation that will never exist again in the universe. Me, Paula Schlax Taylor, will never exist anywhere else in the universe. And it's making me emotional. And I have gifts that have come from my soul, from these other versions. This first version life, the singing that I did, I am using that now. I am reconnecting to that gift. This is not an all or nothing thing. Every one of these lives has given me a gift in some way, even if it's now just to recognize, man, I got duped by the trickster for like 2,000 plus years. What the heck? And in a quantum space, like that's the blink of an eye. And all of these things are probably happening at the same time. And so as I do this work, that's the other thing. This woman has been released from trickster energy. And she's got some karma to work through. That's not my karma. That ancestral energy, that's not my karma. I can clear what's in my own space, and then I can serve to be that unique and ultra special version of myself that will never exist again. There will never be another version of my soul that has this combination of gifts in this exact way. I have this ability to like take all this information and synthesize it and explain it in a way that people understand mostly. I have this neurodivergent sensitivity to sound that allows me to hear these frequencies and channel them because I have that gift of using my voice for multiple lifetimes. It is time to claim your worth as your unique personality self, as your unique soul self, and as your unique link to the quantum oneness, to source, to divine unconditional love. And part of that is recognizing energies that are not serving, letting those energies go, banishing them, exiling them, strongly disinviting them sometimes, because you're an attractive light. The more you claim your light, sometimes the more it attracts. And as you fill your space fully, there are no spaces for that energy to sneak its way in. And you begin to be more conscious and more aware. And you begin to set intentions. Like when I see energy coming in, I'm like, I'm not sure about that. I will out loud, maybe not in the actual situation, but at some point out loud, I will say, if there is trickster energy involved in this situation, I want nothing to do with it. I am done with that energy. And as we release, we open space for that connection to what we're here to do in this unique differentiation that will never exist again. If you are enjoying the show, we would love to have you join us in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary. It's only $11 a month. You will receive all the powerful activations that go with each full episode, as well as bonus episodes of the podcast, special free meetups, special discounts to my services, and a community of like-hearted individuals where you can explore and question some of these things we talk about that you may want guidance with. You are a being of immense expansion and immense complexity. And as long as we are in these physical bodies, we will continue to find little pieces of muddiness or disharmony, incoherence, of contraction. And we can repeatedly set the intention to be aware of our field and to call in as much clarity, expansion, and harmony as we can. That is the nature of our being. That is the source of our being. You are powerful beyond measure. You are expansive. You are so loved and supported. Have a beautiful rest of your day or evening, and I will see you on the next episode of Wind Down Wednesdays.